Hello, fellow freelancers. Today, I'm talking to you about something that makes me very, very, very mad. And I know it's a stupid thing to get mad about, but it still gets me mad. And so I just wanted to share this with you and kind of vent because it's something that really annoys me. And it's about languages and dialects and the difference between a language and a dialect. And it just gets me mad because so often you hear people talking about languages and dialects, kind of disparaging dialects, saying they're not evolved as much as a real language and stuff like that. And I'm here to say it's completely not true. There's a quote, I can't remember who said it, but that a language is a dialect with an army and a navy. And it's very true. The only difference between languages and dialects is politics. That's it. And I'm going to stand by that, and I will defend that statement no matter what you have to say, because it's absolutely true. And in fact, so what you hear a lot of people say, oh, the difference between language and dialect is that languages are written and dialects aren't. Well, yeah, yes and no, except no. The only people who decide that languages are written and dialects aren't are the people in charge, i.e., politics. That's the reason it's there. And so the main reason that, say, Mandarin Chinese is written the way it is, and then the other dialects like Cantonese and Shanghainese and Taiwanese aren't, or kind of borrow the writing, or use the same writing, let's say, is because of politics. That's it, pure and simple. And that's the way it's gone. By the way, the Mandarin Chinese, what we call Mandarin Chinese now, is completely different from what was Old Chinese. Like Confucius, if he spoke now, no one would understand him. And out of your normal Chinese population, it is completely changed. And you can find videos where they've recreated how old and Middle Chinese was and stuff like that. But it's the writing has stayed, but the way they speak has changed. And anyway, that's to say, it's just purely politics the way it goes. And in fact, you see other examples of this. I mean, I don't know. Anytime a country is created, and a lot of Dutch people are going to get mad at this, but let's face it, if Netherlands hadn't had such a strong navy and had been around so much of the world and had so much power, it will probably be a part of Germany right now. And so what we call Dutch would have just been a German dialect rather than its own language. Okay, let's face it, that's the way it is. A lot of German people like to say that Dutch is basically a German dialect, but it's its own language. Of course, it is its own language because the Netherlands is its own country. That's the way it works. And so that's the way it is. Now, so the other issue that people, or the other reason people say there's a difference between language and dialect is that they're mutually intelligible, whatever that's supposed to mean. They say, oh, if two things that are mutually intelligible, it's a dialect of one's a dialect of the other. Well, there you have the issue too, because, say you take High German and Low German, which are different but mutually intelligible. Low German isn't mutually intelligible with Dutch, but High German isn't necessarily. And by the way, between Dutch, Norwegian, and Swedish, I've heard is kind of the same. That it's mutually intelligible one from the other and the other to the third, but not from the first to the third necessarily. But anyway, you find this all over the place. Many times languages gradually change, and so certain things can sometimes be mutually intelligible and sometimes they aren't. And it really just kind of depends on what you speak in the first place and what you're speaking later. And so they're just relative one to the other. And so that's no way to classify languages or dialects. And I just don't buy it at all. The only thing that separates a language from a dialect is politics. By the way, when people say that dialects aren't as complicated or they aren't as built up, as sophisticated as languages, that's completely false. In fact, the opposite is usually true. Languages, what we call languages, are actually more simplified than dialects. And why is this? It's because anytime adults have to learn a language, it gets simplified more. This happened with English. English used to be like German with all the declensions and the genitive, dative, accusative, stuff like that. We got rid of all that when the Norsemen came and, we're like, what the hell is this? No, we're not going to deal with this. We're going to have, this is to you, this is from me, and that's it. We're not going to deal with all those declensions. And this is very broad generalization that I'm making. But by and large, that's how it works. Even Mandarin Chinese, which everyone says is so hard, is easier than any one of the so-called dialects because so many adults have to learn it. The general rule is anytime adults have to learn a language, it gets simplified. Dialects are usually learned ever since you're a young kid. And in fact, the dialect then has time to become more and more and more complicated over time, especially if it's sort of isolated. So you'll find these dialects what are called dialects, but smaller kind of remote languages that are extremely complicated. Some Native American languages are extremely complicated if you look into them, and yeah, you find examples in the Caucasus. They have various languages that are known as being the most complicated in the world and stuff like that are spoken by a few hundred people basically, and so it really is a misnomer to try to disdain dialects and say languages are more important. And it really kind of annoys me many times when people just take that for granted. Look, obviously politics exists. If you want to decide whether you want to learn a language, learning Mandarin Chinese will be a lot more useful than learning Shanghainese dialect. I mean, that's the case. That's a fact. But it doesn't mean that it's any more sophisticated or even interesting, quite frankly. And I think a lot of the dialects are, it depends what your purpose is. If you actually want to learn an intricate, interesting language, then you can look at all the dialects and they'll be extremely interesting. If you want to, travel and communicate with a large number of people, then you should learn the languages because let's face it, you speak Chinese, Spanish, English, and Arabic, you're pretty much communicating with everyone. And, but if you learn like 4 so-called dialects or these remote languages, then you can communicate with very few people. But anyway, that's pretty much it. That's my rant is over. I just really get annoyed when people don't notice the difference or just say there's such a big difference between language and dialect when actually there isn't. It's just history and politics and that's it. Yeah, that's all I have to say for now. Okay. I'll talk to you next time. Bye. Savedum.